I like choppers, they're like birds. Where are the choppers? I like choppers, they're like birds. Welcome, huge movie fanatic Nate stopping on by. I reused that video clip and audio clip because that's what they did in the movie. I'm pretty sure they reused his line and they used the same line twice. So I tried to do the same thing, and I not only tried to, I did do the same thing in this video. That's how it goes on this channel. Very detail oriented. Today I'm stopping on by for another one of my famed movie/Blu-ray reviews. Today I will be reviewing the movie and the most recent. I don't think is it the first? I haven't been paying attention. I can't imagine it's the first Blu-ray release. Anyway, whether it's the first or not the first, it's the most recent Blu-ray release of Good Guys Wear Black. Just recently, well, I don't know how recent, the most recent Blu-ray release of the film on Blu-ray from Kino, Lorber. My history with this movie probably goes all the way back to 2004 or 2005. I was working at Movie Gallery from like '04 to very early '07, so I'm pretty sure we actually, at the store I worked at, I'm pretty sure we had like a VHS bin or a bin where this was in the bin. You might be able to see it's very sun faded. There's a square there where the price tag was, right on his forehead there where the price tag was. That'll show you how sun faded this is. I'm pretty sure we had this brand new factory, sealed, shrink wrapped, just in some VHS bin at the movie gallery I worked at, or if not the one I worked at, I went to another one and found it, whatever. But pretty sure I blind bought this maybe '04, '05, brand new from a movie gallery. And having grown up in the '80s, I was very aware, of course, of Chuck Norris and stuff. But honestly, you can't really see. I don't think, any Chuck Norris stuff in the '80s when I was a kid or even a teenager. It's hard to see everything when you're a kid, so I didn't get into Chuck Norris movies until I would guess I was more in my mid to late 20s or thereabouts. So it's never too late to get into Chuck Norris. So back then in '04, '05 or somewhere around there, I probably got this, which is there's no actual freaking year on the cassette, so I don't know when this actually would have come out, but on HBO video, this is what the back looks like. No year, I don't think, for the release year of the VHS on this. And then I liked the movie apparently enough to go for it and upgrade to the DVD at the time. This probably would have been at the time the best way to watch this on home video, maybe '05, '06, '07. I don't know when the hell I would have gotten this. I also don't know if there's a year on this. There might be, there might not be, but it's the HBO home video DVD release with the snapper case. Little tour of that in case you're interested. So, Good Guys Wear Black is one of the early Chuck Norris films from, I think, the late '70s, 1977 or '78 or thereabouts, and it starts in Paris in 1971 or something, whereas, for the record, this is kind of mostly like a kind of political talkie movie, probably low budget. And I just realized recently, like, I'm pretty sure, I don't think the VHS says it all, but I think on the back of the DVD it says not rated, which is really strange. But if you look at the back of this, does it say? No, it doesn't say on the back of this, does it? Oh yeah, on the bottom there, bottom corner, it says PG. So I didn't realize until I got this, or sometime this year after I got this, that this whole time Good Guys Wear Black is rated PG. Of course, it's before PG-13, but the '70s were, Jaws. You could eat people alive and, slice people's legs off and jaws and things, and that's rated PG. But the '70s, when apparently this violent, kind of, sort of, a little bit of bloody action movie can be PG. Honestly, that was kind of disappointing to learn that. It's funny how the movie didn't change, but me learning this year that this is rated PG kind of altered my perception of this movie. Oh, now it's a pansy movie, even though the movie didn't change one iota, which is kind of funny. But probably a relatively low-budget movie, one would think. It's basically just this kind of big cloak and dagger politics stuff regarding, the prisoners of war, POWs that are still being held in the early '70s in Vietnam, and this one, quote-unquote young up-and-coming politician's, kind of sleazy he realizes that it's probably best for more expedient to basically just leave the POWs there and not facilitate their release or whatever. But he has to at least try to get some of the POWs out for kind of a whatever to try to save face. So unfortunately, Chuck Norris and his gang of people, his little commando unit, who are dressed from head to toe in all black and happen to be named the Black Tigers. I think it's the Black Tigers, right? Black Panthers was something else. Black Tigers, I think, is the name of Chuck Norris's commando unit. Incidentally, Chuck Norris's, they always have to have, like, I grew up in the 80s with all them kind of, action movies and Commando and John Matrix and all this kind of stuff. They always have to have a really cool name, and I gotta tell you, the character name of Chuck Norris in this film can't get much cooler. John T. Booker is the name of Chuck Norris's character in this film. Basically, I don't know if he's the head, the commander, the head honcho of these all dressed in black crew by the name of the Black Tigers, which took a very long time to come up with that title, and took some kind of really experienced costume designer to make the costumes, even though you only see them in a night scene and they're wearing all black, so you can't, well, no, you see them in the day initially, but so you can't, but the majority of the time you spend with the Black Tigers, it's at night and they're wearing black, so you can't really even enjoy their black uniforms and stuff. But what's really strange about this movie is that the main, like, I guess what you'd call action scene, or the most explosive action scene, happens in the early portion of the film, like the first third of the movie. I mean, the first fourth of the movie, honestly. Right towards the beginning of the movie is the most slam bang kind of action scene in the early, I think it's like 1971, when this politician is just trying to save face and pretend to try to get some of the American POWs out of Vietnam. And we find out that as this operation wears on and afterwards and stuff, that this was kind of just a planned just BS mission with no plans to, they would drop off the Black Tigers. Maybe they dropped them off at a place where they knew there was no American POWs, basically just drop off the Black Tigers to more or less leave them to die and be killed by the Vietnamese, and don't pick them up, and then that's that. Luckily, they've got John T. Booker on their side, so after this brief little action scene, which is admittedly the biggest kind of most explosive action scene in the movie, which you normally save for the end of the movie, it's really strange that it was, featured so early on in the movie. So as much as I want to fault the movie for doing it kind of backwards, is kind of interesting. But I mean, this is the late 70s, before a lot of these action movies of the 80s, so it's kind of like, it's not necessarily set in stone yet, the method by which we do these kind of action movies. So it's interesting looking back to a late 70s action movie and see that, yeah, the most slam bang explosive bit was early on in the film. But what's so funny about this is, after the mission, of course, when they go back to the LZ, which is for civilian speak, landing zone, to find no helicopter in sight, John T. Booker exclaims very smartedly, I don't know what he says. He says, something ain't right in Houston, or he doesn't say that, but, we've been set up or whatever. Someone's going to pay for this screw up. Yeah, us. Someone else says that, not John T. Booker. But anyway, to make a long story not so long, they realize that this is all a bunch of baloney and they're not going to get picked up. So at that point, well, if you're in Vietnam behind enemy lines trying to, 1971, trying to, go and get some prisoners of war and take them out of there. Well, the one good thing about not finding any prisoners of war that are all, maybe, inches away from death or unable to walk and stuff, is you can just walk out of Vietnam, apparently. It just takes several weeks to walk out of Vietnam and back to the States or whatever. It's kind of, they just cut to like, 5 years later, and we don't ever find out. I guess, the survivors of this crew, including Gordy, who, it doesn't really show what happened to him, but he got hit with something in the head, and Gordy becomes shell-shocked, which is a character which honestly isn't in the movie enough. It would have been cool to see more of, Gordy's goofy-ass lines, and because every line, post-shell shock that Gordy has is just stupid, and it's just fun to make fun of the lines and stuff. Like, a little like pelicans. Like everything he says is just the performer. You know, oh, I thought you were Sammy. You look like Sammy. The actor that does it just does it so well. But one of the things I want to actually comment or compliment the movie on is one of my biggest pet peeves. It actually occurs in one of my favorite films of all time, Friday the 13th from 1980, is when you have a movie that opens in the past and then it cuts to, you know, present day. I hate when the movie says present day, because look at Friday the 13th from 1980. This year it's 45 years old, so when you cut to the present day scene and it says present day, well, that's 1980. If I'm watching that in 2025, it's not present day. So it's kind of a movie, you know, kind of being a movie fan, a kind of a gripe I've got with movies. This movie does what I think all movies should do, which is to not say present day, because in case you happen to be watching this movie in 2025 and not 1977 or 78, it simply says 5 years later. That's not so difficult to do. So you can either say present day or, you know, such and such odd years later or whatever, or simply say, you know, 5 years later works, however many years later, or they could have said 1977 or 78 or whatever. But now, cut to 5 years later, we cut to this just badass racetrack with this badass Porsche. I don't know, I still don't know how to pronounce it. I call Porsches Porsche when I say the word twice a year or once every other year or whatever. So we see this cut to 5 years later, this really, oh Jesus Christ, I didn't even talk about the opening credits of this movie, which really set up the scene for, yes, this is very much definitely made in the 70s, and the opening credits feature this wonky ass, I don't know, this is right at the beginning of, you know, right around the video games, you know, starting and to appear in video game arcades and all this and that. Something that I can only describe as like an early video game kind of a, you can tell they overlaid this kind of whatever, early video game / Atari 2600, just nonsense over a slow motion version of one of the fight scenes, karate fight scenes that Chuck Norris is later on and towards the end of the movie, probably in the parking lot one. And they kind of overlay this, I don't know, half-ass. I mean, it's not like real computer graphics. It's probably analog version of like this, whatever you want to call it. Just, you know, they slow-mo that action karate scene and have different colors like green and I don't know if it's red. It kind of goes from, maybe fades some different colors, and this wonderful 70s music to open the film, and just this goofy ass, which almost kind of headache-inducing freaking graphics, which at the time probably looked really slam bang and amazing, but in 2025, well, even when I first saw this in 2004, probably is when I first saw that the opening graphics were kind of laughable or whatever, but I almost forgot to mention that, but good thing I didn't. But cut to 5 years later, and now John T. Booker is a test driver. Well, he's a professor, I think, a college professor, who also does some test driving for, I don't know what, Porsche, I don't know what, but like a darn fool, he took the Porsche instead of the salary or whatever. But you know, you can't have John T. Booker just be a professor. I can just see them, you know, writing this movie in a day or two and being, you know, at the typewriter or at the notepad. You know, we can't just have him be a professor. You know, he meets the hot chick, you know, at his little classroom in some little tiny like 10 by 10 room or whatever at the prestigious college he teaches at. He can't just be a professor. You know what? We'll make him also a test driver for Porsche, who's got this hot blonde just sitting in the pit just waiting for him. And even if he pisses her off and has to, you know, weasel out of the date, she'll still drop him at his illustrious college of fucking 10 by 10 room full of a table with 8 people or 6 or some odd people. But at this, it's fun how it's I don't know if this movie would have been controversial at the time, you know, coming out not incredibly terribly long after Vietnam, not even like 10 years after or whatever. I don't know if the viewpoint held in this movie that, you know, that John T. Booker character kind of, you know, briefly espouses at the brief tail end of his little, you know, lecture at his little half-ass college teaching job, professor job, you know, the negative sentiment regarding, you know, America's participation in Vietnam. He actually says, you know, which I would actually agree, and a lot of hopefully other people, maybe Jesse Ventura would agree with, and maybe many others, that you know, obviously America's participation in Vietnam was just a you know, clusterfuck and should have never really happened. But it was really interesting watching this in 2004, and just God, it just seemed like really early in the late 70s to even put that in a mainstream, you know, Hollywood kind of action movie with Chuck Norris. To have Chuck Norris kind of have that point of view about like this negative idea of, you know, America taking place in Vietnam, and not being like some flag waving, you know, like, yeah, you know, if only we had 10 more years in Vietnam, we would have got the job done. But it was very interesting to see that the Chuck Norris characters actually has a negative view upon the participation, United States of America's participation in Vietnam. But this is the locale where John T. Booker meets the hot, oh my God, she's so hot in this movie. Not that you see her in a bathing suit or anything, but even in clothes and stuff. She wears this turtleneck sweater because they go up to the mountains and stuff, and she's even hot in the turtleneck sweater. I, of course, knew about Ann Archer from, or is it Annie? Annie/Ann Archer, from mostly the first things I would have seen her in would have been like Patriot Games and Clear and Present Danger and stuff. I don't think I've seen a whole hell of a lot at the time or even since then of Ann, or is it Annie? I don't know which way to pronounce. Maybe it's Annie Archer, possibly, but oh my God, she's probably like, I don't know how old she would have been in this movie, if she's in her mid-20s or something, or yeah, maybe mid to late 20s, it's hard to say. But she plays this, like, we come to find out that she's like, I think a lawyer who, you know, sat in at a cocktail party with one of these high big shots who might have been in, maybe it was part of the, you know, or at least he was like the guy who was the underling to this, you know, this young up-and-coming politician who basically, you know, created this whole sham to pretend to get some of the American POWs out of Nam. Or anyway, this is all explained off camera, but she, you know, she talked with the older underling of that guy who probably, you know, made up the BS frickin' thing to try to get some POWs out of there. And she, you know, he in a drunken stupor talking to this hot chick in a Washington D.C. cocktail party maybe said a little more than he should have, and which kind of, I guess, you know, caused the Annie Archer character to go all the way to California to seek out John T. Booker. And it's kind of like if you've seen the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie, yes, I'm going to review it this year. I promise. I'll have to rewatch it, and I don't have to. I get to rewatch Commando, and I can finally review it this year for its 40th anniversary celebration. But very much like Commando would go off to do, this whole movie, or the majority of the movie, is about, you know, assassins taking out one by one all the members of the Black Tigers who participated in that botched frickin', you know, attempt to get the POWs out of Vietnam. So, you know, this one goes, that one goes, and, you know, Annie Archer's kind of like goes to John T. Booker to, I don't know what her interest is in it or whatever, but obviously they fall madly in lust and, you know, make love on the first date, and all this kind of beautiful, you know, late 70s kind of romance, you know, action movie stuff. And no, of course, it's rated PG, so you don't see her naked or anything. You do see her in like you do see her legs. But looking at the Blu-ray, I don't think I ever noticed it until I watched the Blu-ray. She might have stockings on, because the next morning she's like just in a t-shirt, and you kind of like see her legs and stuff. I think she might have stockings on, which for the movie, which if that's the case, that's kind of disappointing. But on the VHS and the DVD, it looked like she was just bare-legged, and she was kind of sexy the next morning. But as we can see, John T. Booker has nightmares still, post-traumatic stress disorder of being in, you know, Vietnam, or the, you know, whatever, being a soldier or a black tiger or whatever the hell he does about. But the rest of this movie is basically about this kind of, like I say, it's more just there's one big kind of, well, not big, but one scene at the beginning, kind of explosions and this and that, and firing guns and driving a Jeep. I was going to say driving Jeeps, but I think it's just one Jeep. And the whole rest of the movie, in the very low budget late 70s action movie fashion, is just like a lot of talking and you know, assassination here and assassination there. But every time I watch it, I watched this Blu-ray twice since I got it, once by myself, and I made Beth watch it once, and it amazingly, it just goes. It doesn't get, for me, it doesn't get boring. That's because there's always something kind of, it's always like got this forward momentum of like, okay, this guy's assassinated, this one guy who's kind of like, he seems like he should be a bad guy because he's working for CIA or whatever. He's kind of like a good guy, helps Booker out. He might be more of a melanated kind of individual, and he's always smoking like a Havana little cigar or whatever, and it's just like, and I want to say that this movie has probably some of the earliest, like, I don't know, personal computer, I don't know if you'd call them personal computers, but what could definitely, be called like a just early frickin' late 70s computer usage in it, where you can see some, on the screen, just, letters and numbers, and, where it indicates, there's basically a contract out on all these people who were in this, this unit to try to get the POWs out of Vietnam. But some early frickin' pre-80s, late 70s computer, usage in this movie, which is really crazy. And you can see on the computer that, John T. Booker has a contract out on him because, of course, he's one of the Black Tigers who participated in this whole thing. But the reason this movie just stays interesting is because once he gets hooked up with like Annie Archer, like she's just, even if she's in a turtleneck sweater, like she's, you can still see her femininity, if you know what I mean, and her face is so cute, and her hair, oh my god. But unfortunately Annie Archer might not last that long in the movie, which is a bummer. I won't spoil that aspect of it, but amazingly the movie manages, although it doesn't have any big huge slam bang action, anything like what happened at the beginning, it manages to be relatively entertaining throughout, and it kind of pretends to, because of its low budget, it kind of pretends to be almost like an intellectual, political kind of, just a lot of, like I say, a lot of talking, a lot of politics, whatever, but it does manage to keep your interest, and it actually does, they do shoot in this kind of, I don't know, I can only imagine like Squaw Valley or whatever, that in Californian skiing resort or whatever. I can only assume that's still in business, but if it isn't, this movie is even more, well, either way, I mean, it's a portrayal of Squaw Valley in the, the late 70s or whatever, and it's really kind of a really cool portion of the movie where they just, John T. Booker and Annie Archer go to frickin', I guess I should say Chuck Norris and Annie Archer go to visit this location because this one guy who's on the hit list, who's still, hopefully alive, they got to go save him. And of course, everyone they try to go save, they don't save. They just get to witness them being shot from a distance. And and then Annie Archer might depart the scene. Well, I won't spoil it any more than that. And then this happens and that happens, and I guess that'll more or less be my review of the movie. Another thing to go along with the kind of goofy opening credits with the whatever half-ass attempt at being like video game effects or whatever that's interesting about this movie is throughout the course of the movie, every time they show like a computer screen with some suspect information, or if they show someone who might be a suspect kind of individual, or there's some kind of danger or something, there's this like electronic sound effects that is, I can't even do it with my mouth. It's just like just like these goofy sound effects, which are supposed to indicate, like, I don't know, which are like supposed to be the suspense sound effects, like if they zoom in on someone, or like I say, look at some scary information on the computer, like that wasn't anything like, but I was just like, and it's just like, it's just the weirdest freaking thing in the world. But like I say, that's one of the things that it so wonderfully captures the era, which, I mean, obviously it's going to be able to do in spades because it was made in that era, but it so fantastically represents the era in which it was made and came out in, like the late 70s. And some of this stuff, like I don't think I've ever heard in a movie before, or even since I'd seen this, just some of them just sound effects, kind of harkens back to some of the first electronic sound effects that was featured in like Forbidden Planet or whatever. It makes you wonder if it's, from the electronic music creators of Forbidden Planet comes the goofy noises and Good Guys Wear Black. But I think that'll mostly be my review for Good Guys Wear Black. It's surprisingly, when you actually dissect it, like in kind of a non-emotional, like Vulcan kind of logical. You think about the movie, you replay it in your head real quick. You're like, this movie should be so boring, because it's like action scene at the beginning and then it's just kind of nothing for the rest. But they managed to keep the pacing of events just interesting enough, and they're, you know, Chuck Norris and briefly for a while there Annie Archer are always like traveling from one spot to another. They've always got a goal to achieve. So I guess the movie somehow in this really quaint late 1970s way manages to, even though there might not be a whole hell of a lot going on, because it's got this forward momentum, you know, he's always on a mission, he's always got a goal to reach. It always manages to be interesting, and every now and then there's a, you know, an event where someone gets assassinated, or Chuck Norris karate kicks, or does a jump kick through some guy's windshield, which is the famous shot, which is not even him who does it. You can tell it's a double with the wig, but you know, obviously Chuck Norris ain't gonna do that. But you know, there's enough like sporadic like events, like you might want to call them like mini action events or whatever, that happen to keep it interesting. I just kind of wish Annie Archer could have been in the movie, I guess, longer, but unfortunately she isn't. Before I end the review, the you know, was it Mr. Howell from Gilligan's Island makes an appearance, a comedic appearance as the doorman or whatever the hell he's called towards the end of the movie and stuff. So if you're a fan of Mr. Howell from Gilligan's Island, that performer, I can't remember his name, is in this movie. Believe it or not, I think I can go as high as, it's just got that late 70s quaint charm to it. I think I can go as high as 3 stars out of 4 stars for Good Guys, Wear Black, something that's been a part of my life for, I guess, somewhere around, what is it, 20 years now? So if you're interested in you know, Chuck Norris movies, or early Chuck Norris movies, or 70s movies, and you haven't seen this, you know, perhaps it's on TubiTV.com for your free viewing enjoyment, or on YouTube or something. But don't expect, you know, the biggest slam bang action. It's kind of low key, lower budget kind of action. But like I say, I don't know how Annie Archer can be so hot in just a turtleneck sweater, but she can. Now on to my review of the most recent Blu-ray release, possibly the first, I don't know, but we'll just say most recent Blu-ray release of Good Guys, Wear Black, which incidentally I got for $10 on a Kino Lorber sale this spring. Looking on the back here, we can see this is a brand new 2K master. Looking at the special features, we can see it's got audio commentary by action film historians this guy and that guy, the making of Good Guys Wear Black, interview with director Ted Post, theatrical trailer, TV spot, and radio spots. Should also be said, just like so often is the case with the Kino Lorber Blu-ray release, there's other trailers for other titles which presumably are also available on Kino Lorber Blu-ray, other Chuck Norris action titles as well, I'm pretty sure, trailers as well, so there you go. I never listen to commentaries of people that didn't have anything to do with the production of the movie, so I can't comment on the commentary, but I did watch, I think, the interviews with Ted Post in the making of, which I think the making of is just a big long, I think, interview with the director as well, and you know, it was kind of insightful. I'm pretty sure he might have said Annie Archer, so it's probably Annie Archer and not Ann Archer, but special features, not that amazing, but you know, I guess that those are just the icing on the cake at the end of the day. I buy a, you know, Blu-ray release like this for, first and foremost, for the hopefully improved image and sound quality. Unfortunately, because of the budget of this film in the late 70s, I've kind of found out by getting this that the image and sound quality can't be too much improved from the DVD version that I got. But to be fair, the scenes that take place in, you know, bright Californian sunlight, and, you know, the Squaw Valley sunlight and snow and this and that, and outdoor brightly lit scenes and stuff, or just brightly lit scenes in general, look really good. And the grain field is wonderfully preserved in this film, and or in this Blu-ray release. One thing I will say is, if you're expecting a better video presentation of like the dark nighttime, you know, the Vietnam, you know, trying to extract the POWs scene, which I was kind of hoping for, that's not going to happen. It's just like that scene has always looked like crap, and apparently it's always going to look like crap. It's so funny how it almost looks like it was filmed in 16mm, like that whole nighttime, you know, extraction attempt scene. looks just like it's just so grainy and just crappy, and unfortunately it looks, if you've seen the the VHS or the DVD or whatever, it looks exactly the same. Then I looked at a little bit of the DVD afterwards, and I can't be sure, but I mean maybe the Blu-ray's even darker than the DVD in the nighttime scene. I can't, don't take, I can't remember. I didn't compare them side by side. But the reason I looked at the DVD during that scene is because, unfortunately, one thing I noticed with the Blu-ray release, this Kino Lorber Blu-ray release, is like some of the audio in the extraction attempt scene at night in Vietnam action scene seems to be more or less a little bit out of sync. Like, so the sound will happen a fraction of a moment before, like, someone gets hit, or, like the goofy, like, wah! Just that, wah! Just fake ass kind of sounds of guys vocalizing their death or whatever. It will happen like a fraction of a moment before it, the sound will happen a fraction of a moment before it happens on screen. So I put the DVD in, and alas, the sound was in sync. So I'm not exactly sure why. And it's only like that scene, from what I can remember, on the Blu-ray that is like out of sync. So that was a little bit of a bummer. I'm not exactly sure why that has to be the case. A little sloppy on Kino Lorber's part. From what I can remember, the rest of the movie was in normal sync, and just that scene was like, slightly out of sync. I know on my Blu-ray player you can kind of adjust the audio sync, and I think again went from over here to over there, and I was able to make it a little better, but I was never able to get it perfect. So that was one of the, I guess, my biggest complaint about that I found on the Blu-ray, on a technical aspect of the Blu-ray's release, this Blu-ray release. Unfortunately, the sound quality, I mean, it's a low budget action film from the late 70s. It's mono. It's never been sounded amazing. It's never gonna sound amazing, with the exception of, there's a little bit of, I don't know how I can describe it, a little bit of sound wobble at the beginning, I think, during the day scene of the introduction of the Black Tiger's sound wobble on the VHS and DVD, and I was, and sure enough, it's on the Blu-ray as well. So I don't know if that sound wobble was something that happened in the mixing. That's in every single, apparently every single version of this film has that sound wobble at that scene. But it kind of adds to the charming, low budget nature of this late 70s just goofy ass movie. A little bit of sound wobble is that was there in the VHS, and the DVD is if you like that, you can rest easy, because it is still on this Blu-ray release. My particular Blu-ray came with the slipcover that looks like that, and as I've been mentioning so often in these more recent slipcovers or Kino Lorber, there, unlike on the spines, they actually put the actual kind of font of the movie on the slipcover spine, which is appreciated, instead of the boring Kino Lorber spine, which we'll see in a second. Deja vu all over the place when you take off the slipcover. Looks like that underneath, but as you can see on the actual spine of the Blu-ray case itself, the boring traditional Kino Lorber font can be found there. At least they give us a slipcover with the actual font of the movie, so thank you for that. Doesn't happen with every title, but in this case you do actually get reversible cover art option. You have the option for this particular cover art, or this cover art, which I must admit is cover art that I don't think I've ever seen before, or poster imagery for this movie that I've never seen before. It kind of plays up his badass, super macho Porsche test driving job he's got, and yeah, obviously the other cover is the more famous cover for this movie, but apparently I can only assume this was actually a poster for the movie as well. So you've got those two cover art options. Obviously I prefer the other one, because that's always been the poster slash cover art that most famously represented this movie for me. And since it's a Kino Lorber release, there's not a whole hell of a lot to see on the disc art, but this is what Kino Lorber has been doing for the past several years on their disc art. Not a whole lot to see in my opinion, but what the hell, you're buying this to watch the movie, not stare at the disc, I guess. And what's really interesting about the cover, comparing it to the DVD release, is that it's like they completely reconstructed the cover. I don't know which would actually be the actual poster. I don't know which one would have been reconstructed if the DVD cover was reconstructed. to match the original poster, or if the Blu-ray one was reconstructed to match the original poster. But as you can see, there's a difference there. You know, it's a different, the hair is different on Chuck Norris. His mouth is slightly open on the Blu-ray, and it's closed on the DVD. It's just a facsimile of the car, you know, the jump through the windshield on the DVD, where it's like got all of the background on the Blu-ray and the reflection of the glasses. So it's really strange, like which one of these is like the original poster and which one of these is like recreated for whatever particular home video release. I guess a person could just search the original theatrical poster to find that out. But yeah, it's really tough to say, but I didn't notice that until I compared the Blu-ray and the DVD cover. It's very weird. Guess that about does it for this review. Thanks so much for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed. And as always, we'll catch you on the next video. I like choppers. They're like birds.